Hello, Randall.
Hello, how are you?
All right.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hi, Kim.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Kim.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Stephen. How are you, sir?
Hanging in there. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
So, Randall, I created a poll for the committee members, so y'all could basically just rank, if you want to just put the rankings on the areas of emphasis, and it should tally them up. So whenever you want me to release that, I don't know how it works. I don't know if I release it now and then people come later, if it still be available. I'm just not sure how it works, but
You mean release it to our emails?
no, it's going to be inside of Zoom.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So good afternoon, everyone. I guess we'll go ahead and begin. Let's do a quick roll call. And so when I call your name, please say present and show us your face on your camera if you can. Okay, so Tamisha,
I'm here.
Kim,
Hi, guys. I'm here.
Stephen,
Present.
Lillian,
Present.
Brenda, okay, Bambi.
Here.
Mhm. Is there anyone else I'm missing? Michelle, is Michelle here today?
Michelle was here and now I don't see her. And Brenda is showing up, but she doesn't have her camera or her microphone on.
Okay, we'll give her a minute. How about Mary? Is Mary present today?
I do not see Mary.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'd like to take the time, if that's all our members, and I believe it is, I'd like to take the time to ask our guests to introduce themselves if they would like.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Hartsnell. I'm here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Kathleen Canino.
Hi, Kathleen. Good afternoon.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, it's Susan Reen, Families Helping Families, Southwest Louisiana.
Hi, Susan. Good afternoon to you.
Carolyn Burrell.
Hello, Carolyn. Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, do we have anyone else that's joined us, Sean, from the committee? Brenda or Michelle?
I mean, Brenda's showing up, but her video and audio are not on.
I know she plans to be present today, so I'm not sure if she's just having difficulty or what, but I do know that she was planning to be present today. All right, well, we'll move forward with today's business, and hopefully Brenda can join us as we begin. But so we're going to talk today about talk about the overview of the planning process and the public forum input we've received. So, Sean, would you like to get us started?
Sure. So we had sent y'all that document, and I'm going to launch a poll, which is basically allowing y'all to rank this areas of emphasis, and it will give you, Randall, the information on where your committee members feel which is most important.
Okay.
So I
Thank
just
you, sir.
launched that. It has each area of emphasis, and just indicate whether you think each one is more important or less important. You can only choose one of those options for each area.
Okay. And so that would be 9 areas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is everyone doing that poll now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We'll allow some time for us to complete the poll. Has everyone had an opportunity to complete your poll?
I mean, Randall, one problem is we have 11 responses, and you don't have that many people on the committee.
Okay,
So I'm trying to figure out now who's responded.
right.
I mean, I can't tell, so I don't know. let me see, maybe I can see it in my other screen.
Kathy Dwyer's telling us the poll was public. And it popped up for everyone is what I'm seeing from public comment.
Bambi Polizzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi.
I was just raising my hand that I did the poll. Oh, that was a
thank
good
you.
way to determine who.
It was.
did.
Thank you. Thank you, Bambi.
So, I mean, just so y'all know that you have both committee members and public responses in the poll. Just as long as y'all are aware of that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Has everyone had an opportunity to complete the poll? Let me ask it a different way. Is anyone still working on the poll? Okay. So I presume that everyone's had an opportunity to take it or complete it. Do we have any comments from the public?
Mr. Jeff Arsenault has a comment.
Yes, sir.
He said, I did not take it. If you're going to invite the public, I would like the opportunity.
It was publicly shared, was it not, Sean?
Yeah, you have a mix of guest and committee member responses already. So since that's already been opened, I mean, I would recommend just allowing whoever else.
Yes.
Like to.
Yes, I'm trying to do that just to make sure
Yeah.
Jeff has his poll and he can complete it.
Mhm. So I'll give you all like a summary score of each one shortly.
Thank you, sir.
Jeff, have you finished?
Sean, I never did see it come up again.
I mean, I don't know how it works, Jeff. I'm just be honest with you. It shows it's still active. So unfortunately, I can't really give you technical assistance.
All right, I was under the understanding that it was council members only. That's okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, we're glad you're here, Jeff, and you're certainly able to give your input throughout the meeting today whenever you feel the need, sir. And thank you for being here. Sean, are you ready to give us the summary?
Yeah, 1 second, please. And
Sure.
just update these numbers.
Sure. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor, sir.
I'm sorry, it's not copying as it should. I apologize for this delay. Well, I'm just going to show y'all because I'll show y'all a different screen. So I was trying to do a score, but you have different number of people responding to each one. So this is not going to give you a good indication. So I'm just going to delete that column. You have different numbers of people who've responded to each item, which will create unevenness in viewing the responses. So for example, in some responses you had 13, some responses you had 14 people. And so
I think Bambi is indicating in the chat that we could do an average of the scores, maybe.
Okay, I'll try that. It's just the problem with doing even an average is if, say, in some of these, like in, say, in health, 14 people responded, so the average is going to pull towards one way or the other, and it won't. But I think what I would do if I was y'all, I'd just look at the big ones. You have, healthcare and community supports and employment each have 10 or 11 people who rated it as more important. And so those kind of pull to the top, if you will. Recreation is the only one with nobody. It indicated it was more important. And so this one's kind of pulling towards this way. Education is slightly higher to me, I guess, let's say advocacy and leadership. but with, 8 people indicating it's more important, 6 important, but nobody indicating it's less important, whereas you, in advocacy, leadership development, and quality assurance, you did have 2 people over here indicating it was less important. So, and so you have kind of 4 tiers, and to me is the way I would view it, without much separation between, I guess, 3 tiers. I mean, these are the same, and then the childcare and recreation are kind of your lowest tiers. I'm trying to pick a number of color you can see through. I mean, that's the way I view it. If I were to rank order them, does that make sense to everyone?
I understand it. Do we have any comments from the committee?
This is Bambi. I agree with the way it was showing, dividing them into those 3 groups. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Okay, and so your task is to select which areas of emphasis y'all would like the council to focus on the 5-year plan. You have the option of selecting all, but this gives you an idea of kind of where people see in terms of importance.
I believe Liz has a comment. I couldn't quite read it all in the chat box. Courtney, could you read it for us, please?
Yes, sir. Liz's comment is, I would imagine that it is all based on where people are in their stage of life as to what is the most or least important.
And this is Bambi. I kind of thought that same thing. I looked at the panel and probably most of us don't need childcare. If we have children with disabilities, probably most of us have waivers. And so I agree that what Liz is saying is accurate. So I think we need to maybe look back at what was the response to that survey, although I feel like the survey is also skewed based on race and gender, possibly, but it might just give us some insight before we completely take it out of the plan, if that's what constituents are saying they need. And also we have to remember people who need childcare are usually younger, have younger children, and they're just not connected to our kind of system and, the council or organizations to get involved and given their input. So we also need to consider that.
Right. Thank you, Bambi, for sharing that. I actually agree with you and with Liz about it.
Randall, you have 2 people with their hands raised.
Yes. Who are our 2?
Miss Brenda Casse and Miss Caranda.
Okay, let's let Brenda have the floor first because she's a committee member, and then Caranda, you'll be able to speak after Brenda has spoken. Miss Brenda, you have the floor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We will be, as a committee, we will be making recommendations to the full council, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So they have the opportunity to give their input and to vote as well?
Yes, these will come out as our suggestion to the council for the 5-year plan, I believe at the October meeting. So we still have quite a ways to go before this is final. We're just trying to figure out today what our priorities and goals will be to recommend. Caranda, you have the floor.
Hello, committee, and thank y'all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I think to respond to what Bambi and Liz said, with childcare, you have to understand that a lot of our children with disabilities do not receive the waiver until they're like 3 years of age or older. So you have children from birth to 3 that do not actually get a waiver, and they do not have access to childcare. As one of the guidelines that we have in regards to writing a 5-year plan, it said to address racial and social economically disparities. And one of the disparities for a lot of parents of children with disabilities is they cannot get their children into the pediatric health cares. We are limited on the amount of pediatric health cares, especially in those rural areas, which was another one of the points in populations that is highly recommended for, according to the DD Act, for us to address. So if we're going to address everything that is major as far as in for our childcare, or for anything, any of the areas of emphasis, we also have to take into consideration that with the survey information that we actually had provided on yesterday, that a lot of those that are in those minority populations were not highly represented. And the reason that they may be highly unrepresented is because they may have had limited access during this COVID and pre-COVID to actually let their voices be heard. A lot of our parents right now do not know about the Developmental Disabilities Council. A lot of them don't know about early steps. A lot of them don't know about any of this, and neither does their medical team. So I think that saying childcare is a 3, so that we may not consider that. I think that we have to consider that this DD Council and our 5-year plan will represent our state in its entirety. And representing our state in its entirety mean that we have to consider those key populations according to our DDA.
Thank you.
Randall, I'd also like to, I guess, echo and add to that sentiment. We only had, I think it was 15 self-advocates who responded this time. And
Yeah.
Historically, when we've had more and we've broken down the data, the survey results of ranking of importance by different groups, such as self-advocates, particularly adults, tended to indicate housing and transportation were higher than like parents of children, which makes sense. So just for y'all to consider that when you looked at all the data of where it fell. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that point, and thank you, Karonda, for your good points. And I believe Jeff has a comment. Can you read the full comment for me, please, Courtney?
Yes, sir. We actually have a couple. One from Miss Kathleen Canino. I know that schools do not let children in pre-K to attend after or before care at schools. Then Mr. Jeff Arsenault says we need more voices from individuals with DD, developmental disabilities.
Thank you both for your sharing and your information.
Randall, I have a question,
Yes, Kim.
and Sean may have to answer this. What is the percent of individuals with disabilities to the total population in Louisiana?
The generally accepted estimates are 1.6% of the population.
Okay, so I don't, and I'm not playing any sides of the fence on this. I'm just stating what the numbers were that y'all reported to us. So if we had 8% of self-advocates report, then we were over the estimated percent for the total population. Am I correct?
I don't view it that way. The way I view it is the council is, and I guess in the DD Act, it's designed to be representative of people who receive services. And so even in the membership of the council, it doesn't try to get 1.6% of the council. It tries to get a balance of, so y'all have to have at least 7 citizen members who are self-advocates. And so
That's
don't
not
know.
what I was trying to get at. I'm just saying that I know we have only 8% and we would love 100%. But I don't know that the numbers are as skewed as we think they might be. Yeah, and like I said, I'm not playing either side of the fence here. I've just asked a question.
I believe Miss Lillian Dejan has her hand raised.
Yes, Lillian, you have the floor.
I think it's important to keep in mind that while we're on the DD Council, our mission and purpose is to serve those with developmental disabilities. So though we only are like 1.6% of the general population, we're also not serving the general population. So the 8.7% of the 8.7%, that figure came from the respondents of the Public Forum Survey Report, I believe. So it's 8.7% people with disabilities. And if we're serving people with disabilities, I think it's super important to have their voice be the majority whenever we are taking opinions and perspectives into consideration, because this is all for us.
I absolutely agree with you, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is that my daughter is 12 and she cannot advocate for herself. She never will be able to advocate for herself. And I know that there are a lot of people in the state like that. So I don't want parents' voices discounted because they're not self-advocates. Maybe I'm not making any sense here, but I have to speak for my daughter. So I don't want what I feel is important to be less important than what self-advocates. Does that make sense? That she needs a voice and I have to be her voice. So when I fill out surveys like this, I'm filling them out as a parent because she can't. That's the only thing I was getting at.
If I may try to provide like a perspective, I think it's what Lillian's trying to say is because you asked about the 1.6% of the population who are people with developmental disabilities. Well, the entirety of the survey and everything we do is all about that 1.6%. And so that statistic is, in my opinion, not appropriate to use to suggest that we're going to just get 1.6% of the responses from people themselves who have developmental disabilities, because all the responses are related to that 1.6%. And I guess to Jeff and Lillian's point is there's a desire to have the voice of people with developmental disabilities considered equitably in y'all determinations.
And I'm not discounting that, but I'm also saying I am the voice of a person with a disability because I am my child's voice. So don't discount me. That's all I was getting at.
Thank you, Kim. You're not being discounted. No one is being discounted. We're all in this together, and self-advocate and parent voices alike are all equally important. But as a self-advocate, I do know that we do need to make a much better effort to include more self-advocate opinions and perspective in our work.
There is a YouTube comment.
Yes.
From Miss Bridget Bergeron. I wonder if the public could give strategies on how to fix the deficits they are bringing up. That'd be helpful to the council, it seems.
Thank you, Bridget, for your comment. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or share? Well, we see our results on the screen.
Ms. Karanda has another comment.
Okay, could you please read it for me, Courtney?
We should always consider self-advocates' voices before parents' voices.
Thank you for your comment, Rhonda. So we have our,
Ms. Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised.
okay, Bambi.
Randall, I think you were, maybe I was reading into what you were about to say or that you began to say, to decide on which categories we should move forward with. Is that correct?
I was about to suggest that. You have something else you need to
Yeah, so I was gonna suggest if perhaps we could move forward with at least the ones that are in yellow and move forward in making some what is the next step to be able to set some goals, correct? So set some goals for those 3 areas that got the most vote, and then then from there move on to the next section, perhaps if that's the will of the committee.
Okay, so that's that's your motion, correct, for us to?
Yeah. So Sean, I think guess that's Sean, to recommend the areas of emphasis with the 3 highest scores, we set goals for those at this time.
Ms. Brenda Case has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda.
I concur with Ms. Palazzola. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take your concurring to be a second to her motion, Ms. Brenda?
I second Ms. Palazzola's motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. We have discussion of.
Okay, so I just want, I thought she was going to make a motion to, I guess, determine the areas of emphasis to recommend to the council. I don't, if y'all just going to say, y'all switching with y'all, the order of, on the agenda. So, I mean, y'all can jump straight to goals. You know, because I mean, I think what I would recommend the motion be is which areas of emphasis y'all want to focus on for the council. And then y'all can scale those back or whatever later, but
I guess, Sean, my concern is if we select those areas and let's just say we select everything that's in the yellow and green. So that means we're leaving 2 areas out. I'm just saying as an example. What if as we go through the process, then we decide to make the changes? We've already made a motion. Does that create?
Yeah, no, that's, it's, I mean, it's fine. It's my, I mean, y'all can move forward however y'all choose. I don't know if y'all want to separate out. We're going to do recommend this set of areas of emphasis, and if y'all going to come back and say, let's look at the other ones in green, and y'all will have divided, I guess, a motion on areas of emphasis. And so my suggestion is that y'all make a clean motion of let's go after all these areas of emphasis, and y'all can change it later. Y'all can amend it later as a recommendation to the council. Y'all have 2 more meetings, but that's all. Yeah. And so maybe I'll just let y'all go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you for sharing it.
So perhaps withdrawing that motion and going with that format, then I would make a recommendation that we focus on all of the areas of emphasis except for recreation.
Okay, do I have a second to Bambi's new motion to focus on all areas except for recreation?
I just have a comment. This is Stephen.
Yes, Stephen, you have the floor.
I feel like recreation, even though the number doesn't really reflect it, should be included. That's all I'm gonna say.
Miss Brenda Case has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda. And thank you, Stephen, for your comment.
Okay, so we have a new motion on the floor.
We
And then
do.
we had a comment
Yes.
that changed the motion.
It has not yet changed the motion, but Stephen did share that he feels like recreation should still be included.
Okay, well then I will second the new motion.
I don't
Okay.
think the new motion is correct. Set the goals for, is it 7 areas? 7, 8, it'd be 8 areas, I believe.
Well, it was 7 till
Not recreation.
recreation.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
So now it's 8.
7, 8. No, there's 8. There's 9 total, 8 if you take out recreation.
So can I offer a friendly amendment to add recreation to that list?
You certainly may, sir.
I'll do that.
So Stephen offers you a friendly amendment. Bambi, do you accept to add recreation to your motion?
Sure, I like recreation.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we do have the issue of will we adequately be able to address all 9 areas? And
Right.
so, yeah, we just maybe we need to have more discussion. I don't
And
have
we
any
still
problem.
we still have time for that discussion. Today is just one part of that. We'll meet again before we finalize this, probably at least one more time, if not twice, before these recommendations go to the council for their discussion and consideration. So we now have a motion on the floor by Bambi and seconded by Brenda with a friendly amendment from Stephen that is to set goals for the 7 areas of emphasis with the highest scores of health, employment, community supports, education, and early intervention, advocacy, leadership, development, quality assurance, housing, and transportation. We need any further discussion of the motion? Do I have any abstentions from this motion?
Technically, Randall, y'all should vote on the amendment and then vote on.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Right. So we're voting on Stephen's amendment to Bambi's motion first. Do I have any abstentions to Stephen's motion? Any objections to Stephen's motion? Hearing none from the committee, this motion is carried. And so now we will consider Bambi's new friendly amended motion. And again, it's seconded by Miss Brenda. And it's to set goals for the 7 areas of emphasis with the highest scores: health, employment, community supports, education, and early intervention, advocacy, leadership, development, quality assurance, housing, and transportation. That's the motion before us. Do I have any abstentions to this motion? Hearing none, do I have any objections to this motion? And hearing no objections, this motion has carried. And so now, Sean, do we need to look at the other areas of emphasis? Or what's your recommendation?
So now you should establish desired outcomes for each area of emphasis. Like what are the outcomes that y'all want to achieve? And you have to just remember, this is over the course of 5 years.
That's right.
Okay. And so my recommendation would be to go look at each area of emphasis and kind of start developing just what outcomes, and there was some sheets, I could go back and pull some of those up related to establishing goals and making them.
Please do. I think that might be helpful for the public to see if we have some of that information to share as we discuss our process today.
So this is just writing good goals, which is where you're headed. And you want your goals to specify an expected effect. So have a targeted population that's affected and overall priorities. And let's go down to see what is a good goal. It's like people develop, like, and they're using an example for healthcare, which is one of the things y'all did. This is just example of language that would encompass or include all those elements, or most of those elements. People with developmental disabilities and their families will have increased access to healthcare services that meets their needs and preferences. Y'all could be more specific than that. There's a lot of information about specific health care gaps and services, et cetera. So y'all can get even more narrow if you want in terms of your focus for each area. That you have questions on that?
So I guess my question to the committee would be, let's pick an area of focus that we voted on, and let's decide how specific we'd like to be in relation to that area of emphasis.
I say let's start with health.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion or a comment in relation to the health category?
So I would say let's put that for individuals with developmental disabilities to have access to appropriate and affordable health care.
Steve, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
individuals with disabilities to have access to appropriate and affordable health care.
Thank you, sir.
And I guess preventive health services. So if anybody wants to go off of that.
Should we had the conversation yesterday, someone brought up about the need for dental healthcare. Should we consider adding dental as well?
Absolutely. Agree. Just a question, would mental health go under this section also?
I would believe so, yes. Isn't that correct, Sean?
It could also go under community supports, depending on what you're talking about.
Okay.
Lillian has her hand raised.
Yes, Lillian.
I'm sorry, I can't quite figure out how to do the virtual hand raise. My apologies.
That's okay.
But with the mental health services, maybe we could put it under both health and the community supports, because it is such a huge concern that we could hit it in both areas.
Thank you for that suggestion. Do we have any other suggestions with relation to healthcare discussion? Or the discussion of the health area of emphasis?
Under the affordable health care, can I maybe add including primary and preventive health services and dental care? Because I'm looking over at the documents that was emailed out yesterday and it included primary care.
Okay.
I want to add that in there.
Yeah, and I'm just wordsmithing. Y'all can correct my trying to combine your thoughts together any which way y'all want. I'm just trying to like add things. I feel like you were further defining this and these things. So if I didn't do that properly, just let me know.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Stephen, for the recommendation.
Does our sexuality trainings fall under health too? Is that something that we want to add if it falls under that category?
Good.
There's a comment from Miss Kathy Dwyer.
Could you please read it for us?
Thank you so much for adding dental.
And thank you, Miss Kathy, for that suggestion yesterday. Do we have any other discussion for the area of emphasis of health?
I just added y'all to-do list, so.
Thank you, it helps me.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no more discussion on the issue of health, and of course, we can return to any of these at any time today. But hearing no more discussion for the area of emphasis of health, how about the area of emphasis of employment? Yes, Stephen, you have a comment or a question?
Thinking out loud, I'm sorry. I'm gonna mute myself.
You have the floor, Stephen.
Sorry, I was thinking out loud.
It's okay.
I'm gonna mute myself. Access to quality. Hello?
I'm sorry, it sounded like both Stephen Wynn and Tamisha were trying to say something at the same time.
I got that feedback as well, Courtney. Thank you. Tamisha,
Stephen, I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
This is Tamisha. I was gonna mention.
Tamisha, you have the floor.
Go ahead. I think it's a. Okay. I was gonna mention in regards to the employment that individuals with developmental disabilities will have access to equal and gainful employment. Because just giving them access to employment is, not enough. I think it needs to be gainful employment when we look at it from a perspective of helping, giving them access and getting gainful employment for equal employment.
Thank you for that suggestion.
I would also like to add access to pre-employment training services.
Thank you, sir, for that addition.
Ms. Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi, you have the floor.
Did you hear me?
I did not. Could you please
I was
say it again?
okay. I was muted and I was talking. I just said it needs to be competitive, integrated, individualized employment.
Thank you.
Sean, I don't know if I said free, but I meant pre-employment training services. Access to free, P-R-E.
Say again, Steve.
I don't know if I said free or pre, but I meant pre-employment, P-R-E,
That's
as in
fine.
before,
I got it.
PRE,
That's-
pre-employment.
Got it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody would do it for free.
I didn't quite get it, but I'm glad you clarified because I was wondering it. But
Can we also add the phrasing self-determined in there as well?
where would you put that, Lillian? Help me.
So access to competitive, self-determined, integrated, and kind of that phrasing. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a comment in
We
our,
do have a comment from Miss Kathy Dwyer.
could you please read it for us, Courtney?
It's in regards to the health goal. I'm sorry for the delayed response, but is it okay that I suggest specialists be added to the health goal?
Yes. Thank you for the suggestion, Kathy.
This is Bambi.
Yes, Bambi.
So whenever we say competitive, that to me, the definition that I've always learned means that that's a living wage, right?
That's the way I understand it to
It's
be
not.
as
It's
well.
not sub minimum wage. It's at least competitive with what people without disabilities would make doing that job, right?
I would agree with you in terms of the definition of competitive being that, yes.
Okay. And the other issue, which I don't know if this would maybe be like an objective, but I think one of the key issues in regards to employment is having those supported employment providers that are trained. And I think goes back to maybe Lillian's point that, you know, oftentimes what I hear is that people, when they go to these employment specialists or employment support providers, that they're told a few jobs that they can fit into, and we need people with disabilities to have an opportunity to kind of be self-determined and what they want to do in their careers.
Agreed.
So customized.
Yeah, I think Sean's right. Yeah, including customized employment. Yeah, that would be appropriate. Can you make the screen bigger maybe? Because it seems kind of, okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna make my font bigger, which might mess up some other things, but if I make my screen too big, then I can't see where I am.
Okay.
So I will blow up the font a little bit and just keep it to one goal at a time.
Mr. Jeff Arsenault has a comment.
Could you please read it for us, Courtney?
We are not going to move the needle if we don't put equal focus on educating employers about working with individuals with developmental disability.
Very good point, sir. Thank you.
So should that be another one under employment?
I think it should, yes.
Anybody want to wordsmith that?
Is that language acceptable?
I'll say educating employers on how to interact with people with disabilities and to be inclusive for all.
Where do we just slide that last statement? I'm getting kind of lost in where to put some of the words. Did I do it, Stephen?
Yeah, I think that's where I was getting at. Thank you.
We have any other comments, suggestions for the employment area of emphasis?
Sean, can you maybe put that in a separate bullet just so we can see it?
Yeah. I mean, truthfully, I'll think in bullets. So if I may, I'm just going to bullet all of these things. That's just how my brain actually thinks. Oh, sorry.
I think Ashley Reynolds has a recommendation for us. Could you read that for me, Courtney?
Instead of interact, I would recommend the word support.
Thank you for that suggestion, Ashley. Do we have any other questions or comments from the public, Courtney?
I do not see any other chats in Zoom, and I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Oh wait, I spoke too soon. Ms.
Okay.
Sanjay.
I'm sorry. I'd like to go back to healthcare, and I think I would like to recommend adding prevention of chronic diseases. Since we already know we have a lot of our people with developmental disabilities already have comorbidities and different things like that. But I think we need to also add prevention of chronic diseases.
Very good point. Thank you.
Welcome.
You have any other goals we'd like to add?
Mr. Jeff Arsenault had a comment, but I'm not able to read it, so I've asked if he could raise his hand so that he could say it.
Okay, we'll give him a moment to do that if he would like.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I'm
You have the
sorry.
floor.
I just wanted to comment. Sean asked me if that captured my thoughts, and one thought in my mind is get out there and begin talking to the chambers of commerce, the Rotaries, and the business networking groups across Louisiana. That's it.
Okay, Thank you for that suggestion. That's certainly a good way we can think about starting to achieve that goal. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to the employment section?
Miss Brenda Casse has her hand raised.
Yes, Miss Brenda.
Yes, for health, would that be behavioral health also?
Very good point.
It was recommended that a targeted disparity be addressed, the population of people with mental health needs. So yes. Although I mean, you could further specify it in the language here, but it's it was captured in the sediments, you know, in terms of the targeted disparity.
Ms. Brenda, would you like to further specify it, or does that language work for you as written?
Thank you, Chairman. Could we please further specify behavioral health?
Miss Bambi Polizzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi.
Miss Polizzola, you are muted. I'm sorry.
I don't know why I'm doing that today. I apologize, guys. I'd raised my hand before Brenda had spoke, and I agree. I think that really needs to be a focus around behavioral health, because I think all of us are very aware of the issues that we have in regards to people receiving quality behavioral health services, particularly people who have developmental disabilities.
Thank you. So our next emphasis area of community supports. Do we have any suggestions with relation to the emphasis of community supports?
Access to qualified direct support professionals.
Thank you, sir, for that suggestion.
I'm sorry, Stephen, did you have qualifiers relative to direct support professionals?
Yes, unless somebody has a better word.
I'm sorry, it's like sometimes it's access to
Quality or qualified.
qualified, trained, right? And sometimes there's some qualifiers.
Miss Carolyn has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Carolyn, you have the floor.
Yes, as a direct service professional, I'm self-direction. I would like to emphasize the emphasis be put on staff being trained with CPR, and then and be trained in the diagnoses of the individuals they'll be working with.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Miss Bambi Polizzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi, you have the floor.
It's my understanding, at least I know for people who are DSPs who are employed through provider agencies, and I'm almost sure this is for all DSPs, that they have to, there's a requirement to be trained in CPR. So if people are not trained in that, I don't know where that's fallen through the cracks, but that's that. I don't know if we need to add that to our plan, because that's already in rules that they're supposed to be trained in that. And the other point I wanted to make is when we said individuals with developmental disabilities will have access to qualified and trained DSPs. I don't know if that's that's redundant. I guess trained is okay. I was thinking like sometimes there's, if you say qualified, that may not require as much training. Some people are qualified based on other things besides training. So I don't know if that's just kind of semantics, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Miss Lillian Dejon has electronically raised her hand.
Yes, Ms. Lillian, you have the floor.
Thanks to recognize the electronic hand raise. I am just as excited as you are. But I just wanted to ask for a point of clarification with the diagnosis of the individual. Can we elaborate on that? I'm not sure I understand.
Ms. Carolyn, would you like to elaborate on your suggestion?
Wait a minute. Oh, yes. So as a self-directed person, I've talked with individuals, I interview them, and then I inform them of the possible behavioral diagnoses that they may incur with the individual, and they need, I provide them with the information about the diagnosis. And so I implore them to read, and then I also question them at some point during their first initial training with the individual to make sure that they understand the exceptionality that persons possess. And then say CPR have fallen through the cracks because some people are not required to have CPR in order to work with certain individuals.
That's super important. Thank you for elaborating.
Thank you. Thank you, Lillian, for asking for that clarification, and thank you, Ms. Carolyn, for providing it for us.
Miss Tamisha Sonye has her hand raised, and also there is a comment from Miss Karanda.
Let's let Ms. Tamisha speak first, and then we'll have you read Ms. Karanda's comment.
Thank you, Ms.
Tamisha, you have the floor.
I'm not sure if I can put this in the right, how y'all say word salad, but, or if I'm overlapping something, but I just remember as coming into the process of, you know, having a child with a developmental disability and being extremely overwhelmed with trying to find community supports. And I feel like at times it's still like that. We have things that are so scattered. We have several different databases, directories, and with having individuals and families having to go to different areas, I would recommend that we, I guess you could say, eventually move into the direction to have a better inclusive database of community supports, to where, you know, it's not so hard for them to navigate and get access to a whole, you know, a lot of the community supports that they need. Basically promoting, you know, full community support access, and being able to access those community supports in one area.
Thank you.
Tamisha, I'm sorry, when you say one area, you speaking geographically or?
I guess maybe to give an example, I follow several things on Facebook, several things on Louisiana Department of Health. You get what I'm saying? Like there's a bunch of different integrated systems that I'm having to go to get access to, all those different support systems, put it that way. And I know that's, something we've had to do over the years. It just kind of comes with the territory. But I think if we had something, especially with new families, they're very overwhelmed. Some of us just become, used of it. And that in itself can be a hindrance, because some families having to learn a lot at one time, plus, hunt down, support, is just not having I'm gonna say inclusive database of, delivery systems. I'm just saying, I guess that's the best way I could put it.
Does this capture it? What you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Randall, we have multiple chats and multiple
Okay.
people with hands raised now.
Okay. Let's go with a few of the chats first, and then we'll go back to the hands raised.
Okay. And actually, Ms. Karanda had a chat, but she's also got her hand raised. So if it's okay with you, I will.
Let's let her have the floor. Ms. Karanda, you have the floor.
Good evening. I want to elaborate on what Ms. Tamisha was actually saying and what the lady that spoke prior to her in regards to the CPR and the direct support professionals. A lot of parents of children with developmental disabilities are not actually getting access to community supports, especially in rural areas. I live on the outskirts of Baton Rouge, and I cannot get access to those services due to the amount of wages that the community support providers are actually being paid, as well as because they said that there's not enough companies that are willing to offer those services to our areas. So having a waiver, you actually have a lot of the community support providers that do not accept the children's choice waiver. So it basically put us in another position where we cannot get access to these supports. Even with trying to do self-direction, like the speaker before me stated, I would have to provide the CPR training to that individual. But not only do I have to provide the training to them, I also have to complete the 90L paperwork, and I have to create that care plan. That's a lot on a parent, especially if that parent doesn't know what all is supposed to entail. So I think that with creating the 5-year plan for that, on this topic, that we also have to take into consideration that one of the things that April spoke about a lot was our care support workers actually receiving a livable wage, because that's another hindrance for why we cannot receive support workers, because they're not receiving livable wages to want to work with our children or persons in the DD community.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder and perspective.
Okay, Mr. Jeff Arsenault has a quick comment. Then Ms. Bambi Polizzola has her hand raised, and Mr. Stephen Wynn has his hand raised.
Okay, we'll go in that order. Thank you.
From Mr. Jeff Arsenault, I think providers would benefit from empathy training. And then Ms. Bambi and Mr. Stephen.
Thank you, Jeff, for that suggestion.
So my comment was in line with what Karanda said, and I've said this for many years, that we have created a system within our home and community-based services of haves and have-nots. Many people who get who move to self-direction, the reason that they report that they do so is to pay their worker more. The reason why providers can't pay the workers more is because there's so many other rules and restrictions. Just like the CPR training, providers, you cannot have someone in your home doesn't go through this very intense amount of training. Also, you have to have pay supervision, staff, office operations. So we really have to address that disparity that we see in those people who can access self-direction and those people who can't. And there are many people in our state who do not have the education, do not have the resources or the information in order to do self-direction. And we really shouldn't have two systems to where if you're in one system, you can pay a staff more, and if you're in another system, they're paid less. So we really need to address that disparity, because what's happening is we're having haves and have-nots. And so I think that's a key thing when we're talking about addressing the issues of people who, I'm gonna use the word marginalized groups, which particularly in my experience has been people that live in poverty, people of color, people who live in rural areas. And I've worked with these populations before in different areas of the state. And so I really think that we need to look at the different systems we have, which gives different access to different pay scales to workers, to our direct support workers.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to capture it. I welcome any feedback if I'm not putting what y'all are saying in the right area.
Bambi, does that so far capture what your intent is?
I don't think that it's clear that if someone reads that who hasn't seen, like I'm talking about whenever we get home and community-based services, the disparity between rates that can be paid to the workers when people go through self-direction and people going through providers. And there are reasons why that exists, and we need to address that.
Should that be a targeted area for us?
I think it would, because it definitely directly affects people who are poor, who have limited education, who live in rural areas, from my experience and knowledge with it.
Randall, you have Stephen and Kelly Monroe, both have their hands raised.
Okay, Stephen. And then after Stephen, Kelly, you'll have a chance to speak.
My comment was just based on what Bambi said earlier. So if you go back up to the top, take out qualified and trained and put quality direct support professionals. Take out and trained. I think if you leave it at that, that kind of.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Kelly, you have a question or a comment?
Take off. Okay, hey, so
Hi.
I agree with Bambi, but well, I just lost it where he was, where it says that to make sure that they had adequate pay levels for community support providers. So are we talking about to ensure that the DSP receives a living wage? What people don't understand is all of those trainings and all the insurance and the auto insurance and everything else that self-direction does not have to have, the providers do. So I don't think it's really about making sure that providers have empathy training. I think it's more, legislative work towards getting these services pay levels higher so that you can hire quality employees.
Thank you, Kelly, for that perspective and feedback. Do I have any other questions or comments?
There
we
is a
have any?
comment from Miss Kathy Dwyer, but she has requested to hold that until the conversation regarding direct support workers has completed.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Miss Kathy. Do we have any other discussion on the issue is related to community support's emphasis and direct support workers in particular?
Would you like for me to read Miss Kathy Dwyer's comment now?
Yes, ma'am, I would. Thank you.
There appears to be several laws passed addressing developmental disability training of law enforcement officers. I think training is important, and think a comprehensive list of recommended / best practices for law enforcement training on developmental disability needs to be developed as required training.
Thank you for that suggestion, Miss Kathy.
Miss Lillian Dejean has her hand raised.
Miss Lillian, you have the floor.
Regarding the law enforcement officers training, I think it's super duper duper important. I think that we are missing a piece. I think we may want to think about also offering trainings specifically for people with developmental disabilities on how to interact with law enforcement officers as well.
That's a great point, Lillian. Thank you. So is everyone happy with the language as we see it for the community supports section so far?
Miss Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi, you have the floor.
Does this, in regards to the law enforcement, does this like limit the scope of what we're doing? I mean, I've heard conversations or, maybe news reports about the role of law enforcement and how basically oftentimes law enforcement is tasked with doing many roles that they really should not be doing. And it really is more about having more access, community access to mental health, people with mental health professionals or social workers. So do we need to have a bigger conversation of say how that impact, like I think we would support that, and that may limit the necessity to have law enforcement interact so often we have people with like behavioral health needs.
Good point. Thank you for raising it, Bambi.
If I may, I agree, Bambi, that seems to be, I mean, just hearing the conversations, I don't think it's about, some people like defund the police, and I actually disagree. I believe police need resources. I mean, part of my recommendation is to have the resources within the police, because they are called as first responders and expected to handle cases disproportionately in terms of the rate of cases with people with disabilities. And so my thinking is they need, if they're going to be part of the service provision is the way I view it for people with disabilities. They should have the resources built into that system to do it using best practices instead of arrest and incarceration and going through a judicial system. It's which is what's happening now. So that's my suggestion.
There's a comment from Miss Kathleen Canino, Miss Brenda Casse, and Misha Sonia have their hands raised.
Can you read Miss Kathleen's comment before we move on, and then we'll move in that order to Tanisha, and then to Miss Brenda.
Miss Kathleen Canino's comment is, can we add school resource officers?
Thank you. And thank you, Kathleen, for that suggestion. And we have another comment now from Miss Kathy, do we not?
Yes, sir, it was just submitted.
Okay.
Perhaps a DD, a developmental disability emergency response plan that could be adopted by all local governments, which would include referring some emergency calls to the human services districts and authorities. Also, Miss Annie Coomer has her hand raised.
Okay, let's get to our committee members next, and then we'll read Miss Annie's, or get to Miss Annie after the committee members. So it was Tamisha first, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say in reference to the training of law enforcement officers. I think sometimes we get confused with kind of to piggyback off of what Sean said with the defunding and things like that, and utilizing certain services as a frontline worker and a service provider. It is important that someone working with the community of very diverse groups is properly trained. Not saying that they're taking on the role of a certain individual or certain healthcare service, but it is important for them to, from my perspective, to be trained on how to handle someone who has, say, a developmental disability. Because if not, then the response, the breakdown of communication is often from that point on. And that's all I want to say. I just want to add that I feel like that is important. I feel it's important to law enforcement officers for them to be able to know how to protect that person when they are responding to things, to matters. And also for, to piggyback off of what Lillian said, for, training for the people with developmental disabilities on how to interact so they too are able to understand situational awareness. I think that's important. Thank y'all.
Thank you. And Miss Brenda, I believe is next. Is that correct, Courtney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Miss Brenda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I did want to add, I know that we had talked about first responders when we did the first year plan and the concept proposals. Can we add first responders under community supports, please? Training.
We certainly can. Thank you for that suggestion. Now, Miss Annie, you have the floor.
Hi, I just wanted to make a quick comment. Having a child with oftentimes severe behavior, who I also try to train how to interact with the public, I do think it's very important to have first responder training that is statewide and uniform in what we're doing. Because I can picture my son being maybe 16 years old and someone would think that he was on drugs with the way he behaves. So if a police officer cannot understand what that child is doing, that he can't help it, then he's just going to assume that he's on drugs. So I strongly support, as a person in the disability community, training of all first responders, not just police officers, but EMTs and firemen, and also training individuals with disabilities on how to respond to these community supports. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for sharing.
Brenda has her hand raised. Randall.
Yes, Ms. Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, I did want to piggyback on the situational awareness training for individuals with developmental disabilities as it relates to first responders. As a parent, I am training my child based on the trainings that I received as a parent, regional trainings and national trainings. And then I have found over the years, as a parent, I've had to figure out how to train my child in various situations. Sometimes I can get things added into his IEP, but most of the time, I have had to do it. It's just a little different because my child has developmental disabilities, and I believe I echo a lot of parents. When I ask my siblings how they train their children, it's a little different than what I have to do. When I talk to parents who have children who are not diagnosed with developmental disabilities, it's always different. You have language barriers. You have sensory processing barriers. So I did want to emphasize that the situational awareness training for people with developmental disabilities is important with regard to first responders. In closing, I think that if we start with the youth,
Thank
and
you for
excuse me, I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it. But if we start with the youth, if we train our children, they need training in the community. We need programs. I said this in the first year planning. There are many entities, first responders related, who would like to help. They need support. They need funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other comments or suggestions with relation to community supports?
Randall, this is Bambi. In relations to what to Brenda's comment, I think what I'm hearing her say is part of the component of this is that people with developmental disabilities be included in their communities. And I think she's right. Whenever you're part of your community and the people in the community, including your law enforcement officers and first responders, know that person, or the people at your grocery stores or wherever those places are in your community, and they know those individuals with developmental disabilities, and not just that you're in your own communities, but oftentimes when people build relationships with people with developmental disabilities, they can sense that when they meet a stranger who has a developmental disability. So I think it goes back to that point of that we need to inclusion matters in how people respond and people having relationships with people with developmental disabilities and their families. And so I don't know how that could be a part of a component of this, but it really should be, it is throughout as one of our principles. But that's a key component to making this successful, that interactions with law enforcement successful.
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions for community supports? I guess I should pose the question, should we have the inclusion listed as a targeted disparity we'd like to see under community supports, community inclusion?
Ms. Brenda Casse has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda.
She goes.
Yes, Chairman, thank you.
My bad, I was on mute. I'm sorry. What I'm
Okay.
hearing are the 6 populations or areas that are listed in the DD Act relative to targeted disparities. So I think you should consider among those when you're looking at targeted disparities.
This is Bambi again.
Yes, Bambi.
I think when we're talking about in regards to law enforcement, that we can't not think about the thing that has recently been brought up in the media, which we know has been going on for decades and centuries, is people of color are more likely to have bad experiences with law enforcement. And so I think that needs to be a part of the law enforcement training, because I know many of my friends who are, and I'm gonna get emotional like Brenda was, who are parents of children of color, and they have, as I may have some fear of my son interacting with law enforcement. I have the security of the color of his skin, and they don't. And so I think that's something that we need to include in as a targeted group in regards to law enforcement.
Ms. Brenda Casse still has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda.
I'm sorry, Ms. Brenda, you're still muted.
Can we put the targeted disparities up again? I want to make sure I word it correctly.
Can you see them, Brenda?
Yes, okay, Ms. Polazola addressed, I think she just say racial and ethnic she said people of color, but I would also like to include people who use English as a second language.
Very good point. Do we have any more comments or suggestions as it relates to the community support area of emphasis? Courtney, do we have any other public comments?
Yes, this is Carolyn.
Yes, Carolyn, you have the floor.
Yes, acknowledge the people who have to use assistive devices.
Thank you. Very good point.
Miss Kathleen Canino has her hand raised.
Yes, Kathleen, you have the floor.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Kathleen. I don't know if it's too specific, but like my son, he cannot say what happened or what interaction he had with, say, the school resource officer. So I don't know if nonverbal.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Does that capture y'all's sentiments? I think that's kind of where Brenda was going as well. And so I just kind of combined that. I added this qualifier to what was specified in there among their 6 highlighted populations.
Is everyone satisfied with the language for the community supports topic as it is written here?
Miss Kathleen Canino has her hand raised again. Oh, never mind. She just lowered it.
Okay.
And it's back up again. I'm sorry.
Yes, Miss Kathleen, you have the floor.
No, I was just going to say, I see that you put required communication supports, but even if he had supports, he's not going to be able to tell me because he doesn't have like the recall, I guess. So I'm not sure.
So would you suggest more training for school resource officers, perhaps, with relation to working with our nonverbal population?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking just, yeah, I guess just more training, or I don't know, there's not a way to like, for parents to know, but That'll work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Yes, Stephen.
I was thinking maybe put it as a separate bullet point, those who are nonverbal or have nonverbal learning disorders. Or if you can somehow squeeze it in there.
I mean, the reason I put limited communication, Stephen, is someone who's nonverbal can still potentially communicate very effectively. And I'm trying to be, I guess, more specific to when their communication is not being met. And so,
This is Bambi. You're
Yes,
under the
Bambi.
bullet of targeted disparities. So that is in line with that other form, right? That where it lists the 6 different targeted areas.
yes.
So those 3 are all under those targeted areas, correct?
Well, it says other, yes, there's, let me,
There's one that's kind of a catch-all, right?
So you have racial and ethnic minority, which is specific. You have English as a second language, which is specific. You have other groups within the population of people with DD. And so that's where the limited communication, I mean, there might be a better way. I can research and figure out a better way to maybe say that or get that. And then people who require technology to participate and contribute to community life. So I believe all of the ones that y'all have listed are captured or identified here among this list.
There's a comment from Ms. Coranda.
Yes. Could you please read that, Courtney?
Can you please include those who communicate using American Sign Language?
Thank you, Ms. Caranda, for that suggestion.
This is Bambi. I was about to respond to Coranda. I feel like those last 2 bullets, if Sean goes back to the other page, would be inclusive of the needs of people with ASL. I mean, maybe it's not specifically stating it, but I feel like, it's talking about communication differences and language differences. So I feel like that would encompass that.
So y'all do not want to include this, or do
Well, you're not on the, you're still showing the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't tell which y'all see.
I know, I get it.
Screens rolling. I'm sorry. Is this it?
Oh, no, that's fine. I think that's good. For me, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm going to remind y'all going to come back in a month or so and refine these. So, this isn't the end. Y'all do have, I kind of lost count, but what, 5 other areas to cover?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So if y'all want to move on, I'll just scroll down.
Yeah, let's move on to education and early intervention. So do we have any suggestions for this area of emphasis, education and early intervention? Hearing none, do our parent
transitional
members have any?
supports to adulthood.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Opportunities to post-secondary education. Including vocational training.
Miss Lillian Dejon has her hand raised, and there's a quick comment from Miss Kathleen Canino.
Yes, Ms. Lillian, you have the floor, and then Kathleen will read your comment.
Access to like positive behavior interventions.
The comment from Miss Kathleen Canino is inclusion in the classrooms. Miss Tamisha Sanye has her hand raised. Also, there is a YouTube comment.
Let's read the YouTube comment because it may be related to this, and then Tamisha, you have the floor.
The comment is from Rebecca Ellis White. Students with significant disabilities can be educated in general education classrooms for 80% or more of the day, but they usually are not.
Thank you for that comment, Rebecca.
She also says this is especially true as the student reaches high school. And Ms. Sanye still has her hand raised.
Thank you. And Tamisha, you now have the floor. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to also add, to piggyback off of the inclusion and appropriate education as well, and also involve and highlight those students who require access to technology, especially at a time like this due to, distance learning. When it's required and it's outside of their control, that needs to be addressed. Because we have several students, especially those who are in areas of, rural communities and disadvantaged areas where they have no access to any kind of internet service, and which puts them behind. So I think that needs to be addressed as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bambi Palazzola has raised her hand.
Yes, Bambi.
I think a part of this has to be qualified teachers and staff. I'm sure there's a better way to phrase that. But that's the best I can come up with right now.
Okay, and we will be revisiting these in our next meeting. So if we don't have everything worded exactly as we would like today, we will be revisiting these to review at our next meeting of the committee as well.
So this is Bambi. Just to
Yes.
add on to that, I think that through my experience as a teacher and as a parent, that when you see the best outcomes is whenever you have collaborative teams, including the parents and the administrators and support staff and teachers, regular ed and special education, working together and using evidence-based practices. And I'm not sure how we can put that within our plan, but that's Sean is going to do a great job of wording that for me. And I want to make sure, Sean, it has like evidence-based practices.
Okay, thank you, Bambi. Thank you, Sean. And we have another YouTube comment from Ms. White.
Yes,
Did
her
you-
comment is no dumping and inclusion and then say it didn't work. Totally agree with you, Bambi.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Ms. Tamisha Sanye has her hand raised.
Yes, Tamisha.
I'd like to also add, in relation to early intervention, I know several parents in the communities had a great bit of difficulty getting access to care as it relates to early diagnosis, which also delayed, intervention steps for having the best outcomes for the child, because it took so long to get an appointment. And I'm not sure whether or not it would really have to do with access to health care, as in, because in this area, we don't have a whole lot of people all the time that are available to, for families to get a diagnosis. So I know some have had to travel to Shreveport, and it takes months and months and months, for the diagnosis. But in the interim, I feel like, there's also some early intervention as an early steps, getting parents access to those, I guess you could say, local resources until an early diagnosis can be made, but, some kind of way to include that.
Thank you. I am very interested to hear the parental perspective on the early intervention topic. Thank you for sharing that, Tamisha.
Ms. Baby Palazzola has her hand raised, and Ms. Kathleen Canino has a comment.
Yes, Bambi.
So one of the issues that we have is in regards to teacher preparation. We have over probably the past decade have seen a tremendous decline in people who are going to college to become teachers. We've also seen programs at our universities completely closed. For instance, our kids with, I think it's deaf, teachers of students who are deaf or blind. And so we really need to focus on building our capacity to educate students by building the teacher education programs. Oh, and the other issue, while I have the mic, is in regards to early intervention, which our early intervention program is Early Steps. And I know that there is, I often hear from families who have problems. I'll let Sean finish typing.
You can keep talking, Bambi.
Okay. In regards to early steps, particularly families who live in more rural areas have have problems getting access to early step interventionists. And so I think that's an important thing that we need to keep on our radar.
Does that capture, is it just rural areas, or did you give another targeted disparity population or group?
Another area is the providers of early steps often have problems going into areas that they deem might be unsafe areas in our inner cities. And so I don't know if it's actually unsafe or if there's perceptions, but those kids sometimes do not get services. So yeah, people living in poverty in urban areas.
But you actually brought, just to clarify, you brought up rural areas for one reason and then urban areas for another reason.
Different, yeah.
Relative to poverty.
It is, yeah, generally it's areas that are in inner cities that that are high poverty areas. Mm-hmm. I think Tamisha raised her hand.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said, Bambi, and add to the target disparities, racial and ethnic minority backgrounds. That is one area.
Would you like for me to read the comment from Ms. Kathleen Canino? Randall, if you said something, I believe you're still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'd like to have her comment read, please.
Education to school staff about what least restrictive environment is and the rights children or students have. Ms. Karanda has also submitted a comment, and Ms. Brenda Casse has her hand raised.
Could you please go ahead and read Ms. Karanda's comment, and then Ms. Brenda has the floor.
Ms. Karanda writes, access and inclusion to the school's specialized programs, including theater and performing arts, extracurricular activities, including sports and clubs, and being photographed and published in the yearbook, if they have one. Eliminate labeling of classrooms according to the exceptionalities, such as autism and Down syndrome classroom.
Thank you for those suggestions, Kathleen and Karanda. Ms. Brenda, you have the floor.
Thank you. Under the early intervention, early steps, can we also target English as a second language?
Thank you.
So based on the comments, I started putting like under qualified teachers, the teachers trained in least restrictive environment and student rights. And then I added the extracurricular activities and recognized members of school community. I did not include yet Karanda's recommendation related to elimination of labeling of classrooms according to exceptionalities. I'm just struggling how to put that in a positive framework.
Do we have any other questions or comments as it relates to the education and early intervention segment? Does everyone so far agree with the language as it is written for this area of emphasis?
I'm sorry, y'all. My fingers are too sensitive. I'm trying to back up so y'all can see the whole thing.
So on the issue or on the area of emphasis for advocacy leadership, what are my suggestions for this area of emphasis? Should I say, what are your suggestions as a committee and as a public for this area of emphasis?
Voter awareness and rights.
Very good point, Stephen. Thank you.
Or voting.
Ms. Lillian Dejan has her hand raised.
Yes, Lillian, you have the floor.
Youth with disabilities having access to age-appropriate advocacy training.
Very good point. Thank you.
I'd say autonomy, decision-making, and supported decision-making.
Do I have any other suggestions for this area of emphasis? Advocacy and leadership.
Sexual abuse and exploitation training.
Training, yes, sir.
Ms. Kathleen Canino has a comment.
Could you please read it for me, Courtney?
Parental training in students' rights.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Ms. Dejan has her hand raised.
Yes, Mrs. Lillian, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sean. I'm going to be nitpicky for just one moment. Can we say youth with disabilities having access to age-appropriate advocacy so we can specifically target them? And maybe
Thank
we
you
could.
for-
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And maybe we can also have people with disabilities having access to legal rights as well. I think parents having that knowledge is super duper important, but I think advocates can also use that knowledge as well.
Agreed. Thank you. Do I have any other questions or comments with regard to advocacy leadership area of emphasis?
Can we include something along the lines of financial?
I think that would be a good thing. Yes, sir.
Financial stability and responsibility. Or literacy might. I think you're on the right track. Literacy. Financial.
Tamisha said she has to leave us. So thank you, Tamisha, for your participation today.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other issues we'd like to add to this area of emphasis? Hearing none, we can move to our next area. And we're on the housing area of emphasis. So what are our thoughts on the issue of the housing area of emphasis?
Access to safe, affordable, and accessible housing.
Very succinctly and well put, sir.
Miss Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi.
I think a component of that is advocacy, so that people with developmental disabilities, I guess, understand, I guess, the housing system and how to advocate for their housing needs.
Would we want that as a targeted disparity under this topic?
I don't know what would be the target. I mean, it's all individuals with developmental disabilities.
It's just a suggestion.
Oh, okay. A certain population. I mean, I feel like there's such a huge housing need that really.
That's kind of what I was getting at, but I get
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's an enormous need.
Yeah. No matter if you're in urban, rural, no matter your
Right.
race.
It's all across the state. It's an enormous need for housing for people with DD in particular.
Bambi, does that capture what you were thinking? I kind of need a cookie at this stage. I'm losing track, so I'll try to write down, interpret what you said in a different way.
Yeah, that's good.
Do we have any other areas of emphasis on the topic of housing?
This is Bambi again.
Yes, Bambi.
I feel like in the area of housing, to go back to discussion we had yesterday and maybe a little bit this morning about the participation in our survey, we had such a low number of people with developmental disabilities actually participating. I feel like this is an issue that people with developmental disabilities can speak to the best. I feel like as a parent, my natural instinct is to keep my child, safe near me all the time. So I don't think about housing as much. There's times when I think I want him to live in his own house. But I feel like this is really an issue where, as we go through this process, that we need to solicit more input from people with developmental disabilities, because it really is about self-determination and self-advocacy. So that's my suggestion as we move forward.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Miss Kathy Dwyer. Also, Miss Brenda Casse and Miss Lillian Dejan's hands are raised.
Okay, let's read Miss Kathy's comment, and then we'll go in the order you just said, Miss Brenda and Lillian.
All right, so Miss Kathy writes, adopting universal design in all building codes for new construction and major renovations. This will help individuals without disabilities as they age. She may have meant to write with disabilities. Also, again, Miss Brenda and then Miss Lillian.
All right, thank you, Miss Kathy, for that comment. And Miss Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, I'm thinking under the housing area, this would be a good opportunity to collaborate with real estate professionals. I know that we've been talking about the Chamber of Commerce, including in the first year plan and some concept proposals. I think this would be a good opportunity to collaborate with real estate professionals.
Thank you for that suggestion.
I'm not sure how to write that as a goal.
Miss Lillian still has her hand raised.
I'm
Stephen Wynn
sorry,
has his hand raised.
Lillian, you have the floor.
I'm not sure if this would fall under housing, but I think one thing that's really important is training on like those independent living skills, like how to upkeep the house, grocery shopping, and those sorts of skills. Maybe having trainings for independent living for people with disabilities. Again, not sure if it falls under housing.
Thank you for that suggestion. And Bambi, you have the floor, Bambi.
Oh, I didn't realize that raised my hand. I was going to respond to Kathy, her thing about adopting universal design in all building codes. I know through Louisiana Housing Corp, that is a requirement for anyone who gets any construction that get funding through the Louisiana Housing Corporation. That's not for all buildings, but I think we have something to build on to advocate for the universal design.
Okay, thank you, Bambi.
Randall, I mean, I also on that point, the American with Disabilities Act, when it was revised in 2010, had language requiring accessible design for any new construction. The problem is older construction doesn't have to come into code unless it's being renovated, and then there are even, I guess, amounts of renovation that have to kick in before they're required to bring it up to the full accessible design characteristics or features.
Mr. Stephen Wynn still has his hand raised.
Stephen, you have the floor.
I would like to maybe add to continue supporting those who live in a congregate setting and are interested in transitioning into a home of their own or something like that.
Miss Brenda Casse has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Fleming said he wasn't sure how to word collaborating with real estate professionals. Do we need to say training? What I'm just thinking about some young adults that I know who don't necessarily need, they should be able to go and get their own apartment or apply, for their house, for a home, whether they want it built or not. But often they'll say, well, I'm gonna need somebody to come with me because whatever their DD is, let me see how I'm trying to say this. They don't understand why the real estate entities don't know how to communicate with them or something to that effect.
Brenda, I think,
I'm just trying to think of how to word it.
so if you look at the second, I guess, area of outcome in terms that is here, I think captures that. And what you're bringing up, I'm interpreting as a strategy, an implementation strategy to maybe get there. And so is it a goal? And it could be a goal, like, and I just need it rephrased in terms of increased collaboration or,
Training, maybe?
Training for real estate, for realtors on how to guide and support people with developmental disabilities through the process. I mean, I guess if that's I'm trying to, but I don't want to overinterpret what your outcome is. So is that, I mean, do you want as a goal to have realtors targeted, or to have, I mean, if this is the outcome, there could be an activity to relate it to that, as a mechanism to achieve this goal state, I guess. But the goal, in my opinion, should target kind of what's the outcome for the individual that we want to have in a house. So I guess that's where I'm struggling with where to put it or how to phrase it. So I appreciate the you helping me understand it better. Brenda and Stephen's hands are raised.
Brenda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mr. Fleming, could we put a pin there as an activity mechanism for future discussion? I appreciate that.
Stephen, you have the floor.
Sean, can you add just under the point that I made about congregate settings? Can you add if and when requested?
Good.
Ms.
Yeah.
Kathy Dwyer has a point of clarification for her previous comment.
Okay, could you please read that for us?
It will be okay. Her previous comment was adopting universal design in all building codes for new construction and major renovations. It will be beneficial for all with and without disabilities, particularly those without disabilities as they age. As a goal, make accessible housing more available through adoption of universal design in building codes.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy, for that suggestion. Do I have any other suggestions for this area of emphasis?
I added that last bullet. I believe the ADA, the American with Disability Act, already requires certain levels of universal design in new construction. So I think we'd have to get clarity on the direction of that if that's a goal.
There's now a YouTube comment.
Yes, Courtney, could you please read that for us?
It's from Miss Cody Wilson. Under housing, could we get building codes to include changing rooms like airports now do for larger individuals in wheelchairs who need someone to change them?
I believe that would fall.
Thank you for that suggestion.
I believe that would not be housing. I believe that would be in community supports. you're speaking of a public facility. It's a building code, it's just different. It's not a house, it's not a residential code. or
But
issue.
we can add that to our community support section, correct?
Can we edit that to take out in wheelchairs and include those with just mobility needs? Thinking about others who use other durable medical equipment like walkers and things like that.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Cody, for your suggestion. Okay, do we have any suggestions for our area of emphasis on transportation?
Access to accessible public transportation.
Say it again, Stephen, please.
Access to public transportation, i.e. buses, accessible taxis, etc. Ride sharing.
Not all ride sharing are public.
I'm sorry, I think you cut off. What was that?
I'm sorry, you say public transportation, but not all ride sharing services are public.
Yeah, so that might have to be a separate bullet then.
Miss Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi, you have the floor.
I think in addition to access, it needs to be, should be affordable and accessible public transportation.
Good point. Thank you.
And I'm just thinking about, with public transportation, I mean, in most of our state, there is no public transportation. And people with disability, so people without disabilities drive their own vehicle, which is not an option oftentimes for people with developmental disabilities. So maybe that's another point, but it needs to be more than just access to public transportation. It needs just to be to me, it just needs to be access to transportation.
Thank you, Bambi. Any other suggestions for this area of emphasis?
Can we maybe put easier access to personal vehicle modifications? I don't know.
There is a comment from Ms. Caranda.
Could you please read it for us, Courtney?
Can you please add access to accessible and affordable transportation in rural areas?
Yes, thank you for that suggestion, Karonda. Do we have anything else we'd like to add to this area of emphasis?
Can we maybe put training for what do you call bus drivers?
Joe, Bob, Mary. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Maybe.
No, I think they need awareness training and empathy training for those individuals that drive buses.
Public vehicle operators.
There you go, something like that.
Thank you, Kim.
There's another comment from Ms. Kathleen Canino and Ms. Caranda.
Could you please read them for us, Courtney? Thank you.
Ms. Kathleen Canino writes training for transportation staff. Ms. Caranda writes, can we please add education to transportation workers on how to aid individuals with disabilities while providing transportation?
Thank you both for your suggestions.
Yes, that's kind of where I was getting.
Any other suggestions for the transportation area of emphasis of our plan?
There's a YouTube comment.
Could you please read it for us, Courtney?
Comment is from Ms. Cody Wilson. Public transportation operators includes streetcars, etc.
Thank you, Cody.
Ms. Caranda has a question.
Could you please read it for us?
Can we include CPR training for public transportation operators?
Very good point. Thank you, Karonda. Any more areas of, any more discussion of this area of emphasis? Hearing none, let's move to our recreation section. Do you have any suggestions for recreation area of emphasis?
Inclusive recreational opportunity, inclusive opportunities in recreation and community.
Activities?
There you go.
Do we have any other suggestions for this area of emphasis, recreation?
Ms. Bambi Palazzola and Ms. Lillian Dejon have their hands raised.
Okay, Bambi, you have the floor, and then after her, Lillian, you'll have the floor.
I raised my hand before Stephen spoke, but he said what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you, Bambi. Lillian, you have the floor.
I also put that individuals with developmental disabilities will have access to integrated community recreational activities. I hope that makes sense.
Like that?
There are 2 comments in the chat
Could you please read those for us, Courtney?
from Ms. Kathleen Canino. Inclusion in or access to camps. From Ms. Kathy Dwyer. More accessible venues such as playgrounds with accessible equipment and activities.
Very good points from you both. Thank you. Do we have any other areas or things we want to discuss about this area of emphasis?
can I maybe add like awareness to these type of recreational opportunities?
Please repeat that, Stephen.
More awareness on these opportunities, recreational opportunities.
Do we have any other comments or questions about this area of emphasis?
Ms. Kathy Dwyer would like to add to her comment.
Could you please read that for us, Courtney? Thank you.
Sure. More enforcement of ADA, especially public playgrounds and venues.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy.
Ms. Brenda Case has her hand raised.
Yes, Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, all of these suggestions look good, but as a parent, and I'm still thinking about, I may be able to afford the camp. I may have access to the camp, but, and I shouldn't just point out camps, but who's trained there? Who's trained? And often we have to train the people on the spot. We have to come in advance and say, this is how you can work with my child. Sometimes they'll say, well, don't pay your fee. Let's just do some pre-training. You come in and show us what to do. And then if it works out, then your child can sign up. And I say my child, but I'm speaking about other parents that I know too. So Mr. Fleming, you see how we could put any kind of training, even if it's just a strategy, maybe we can target some training.
I mean, I think you can, that goes along with what Stephen was bringing up.
Thank you, Brenda, for that comment.
Does that capture it, Brenda? I kind of incorporated yours into Stephen's.
Ms. Brenda has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, can you read what Mr. Stevens? Which one is Mr. Stevens?
Well, this is a combination of yours and Stephen's now. So he had said that individuals with developmental disabilities and their family members will have increased awareness of integrated inclusive recreation opportunities. What I put in there was in training on how to access these options. I'll be honest, the way some of these things are written, and I think y'all have done great, is we're kind of getting towards 4 o'clock. These will, the way they're worded in terms of like when you talk about, say, a lot of you say that people who have training and access to certain activities. And I will recommend as we go back and review the checklist, is it a well-stated goal? The outcome is really going to me, will be worded something like people with developmental disabilities will have information related to opportunities on integrated inclusive recreation opportunities and how to access them. How we get there will be probably training. We'll probably have a couple of strategies to implement to make people informed and aware of those things. So there's gonna be some wordsmithing between now and the next time y'all meet, but I think y'all have done great with highlighting what y'all think is important in terms of big outcomes. And this is kind of how the conversation started yesterday, is really trying to back up to write a goal. And so it's not, I don't want y'all to get caught up in right now the language of, is it the activity, objective, or goal? We're gonna have to clean that up. But I think y'all have done great with putting all that down. And so my suggestion, unless y'all have more to add, is to take these, and we'll be sending these out to y'all, and evaluate them against those standards of a goal. And we will provide language recommendations on how to craft these and even work these. If we think it's an activity or an objective, we will help try and craft some language for y'all consideration for the next time y'all meet, if that is permissible.
Yes, thank you, sir. It would be appreciated.
So if I were to make a recommendation, is to maybe someone to make a motion to adopt these as the intent of the direction, and maybe to direct staff to, y'all can send us feedback on it, and we can, we'll have these, and we can have some other language recommendations for how to maybe fit it into the 5-year plan format in terms of goals, objectives for y'all. Okay.
If the committee has no objection, I certainly take your suggestion there, sir. And look forward to seeing those suggestions and our edits at the next, language edits at the next meeting.
Ms. Bambi Palazzola has her hand raised. Also, Ms. Caranda has a comment.
Let's read Ms. Caranda's comment first, as it may be relevant to the discussion, and then Bambi, you have the floor.
Ms. Caranda writes, can you please include training on working with individuals with developmental disabilities? I'm inquiring due to Baton Rouge Zoo in under the recreational park.
Yes, thank you, Caranda. Now, Bambi, you have the floor.
So I'll make that motion that Sean just stated in regards to approving what we just did for the past 3 hours, and having staff. Sean, you want to just type it out, and then I'll. Have staff put it in the format it needs to be for the plan.
Ms. Brenda Casse has her hand raised.
Yes, Brenda, you have the floor.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought Mr. Fleming had started typing with what Ms. Corhonda had said. Did I can't, my screen is smaller.
Well,
It was in regards to training And she said something about Baton Rouge, but that's what I was trying to emphasize. We can get our children, we can pay for it, we can get them to the facilities, but when we get there, if the staff isn't trained, then it doesn't work out. It leads to frustration and meltdown.
So, you know, I perceive training to be a specific activity. And we're getting to, you know, when you look at your current plan, you have goals, and the goals, if you think about it, is people will be informed. You'll have, you know, staff who understand or qualified to do certain things. And then the training is how you reach that goal. And so if y'all will, and at this stage of the game, in terms of the 5-year planning, well, let me just say, each year, y'all are accustomed to putting in activities to achieve the goals and objectives. And so I think it's okay that y'all wrote some things like, this is what y'all see. And my interpretation of that is y'all expect for the Parks and Recreational staff to have certain competencies in serving people with disabilities. And so in my mind, I'm already interpreting that into a different goal state that I would like to present y'all. And then y'all will get there by providing training to reach that goal. Does that help y'all?
Miss Lillian Dejan has her hand raised.
Yes, Lillian, you have the floor.
Just as a quick point of clarification, will we be developing our specific objectives at our next 5-year planning committee, since we didn't complete that today?
I believe the answer to that is yes. We have, it's a long process here that we've just begun. So we're giving them, the staff, areas of emphasis to work on. And then once they come back with the recommendations they have and the language edits and such, then we'll begin to look at how we put that into action in terms of our goals and objectives. So I believe that the short answer to your question, Lynn, is yes.
Thank you.
So what I encourage y'all to do is, in the first handout or hyperlink of this meeting, it's sort of like an orientation package explaining the process. And this process was approved by the council last April, at the April meeting, and the whole council approved it in July. And so we're kind of, you can see, this might give you a snapshot of where we're going, Lillian, and everyone else. And so, you know, right now, we've done all these things. We were a little behind schedule, but not too much, you know, because in July or in June, which we're doing it in July, but this is your first meeting right here. You've not developed objectives. I would actually argue, you know, your goals, we'll need to polish them up a little bit, but don't worry about that. You're going to meet, there's some other activities. We're going to get with, the council's supposed to get with the Human Development Center and the Disability Rights Louisiana to review the public survey, and we're going to discuss how we can collaborate together. We're going to develop a report for the 5-year plan, and then in August, when you meet again, so we'll be sending out a set of dates for y'all to schedule another meeting. You'll review all this stuff again, and then we're going to give you what you created today, and I'm going to have some cleaned up language trying to capture what y'all said in goals and objectives. And then y'all will make a recommendation in October to the full council with that plan of goals and objectives. Does that help you? Okay.
Okay, does anyone else Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Miss Brenda Case has her hand raised.
Yes, Brenda.
Yes, I thought we had a motion on the floor. Was there a second?
We do not have a second to that motion. So the motion is there before us on the screen, and it reads, to adopt the goals as discussed and direct staff to create language to assign with the, can you help me with that acronym there, Sean? I know it's ITAC, but what does it stand for? The ITAC evaluation of goals for the committee's consideration at the next meeting is what the motion says.
Oh, sorry, my mic was muted. I'm sorry. Wow.
Okay. I was asking you, Sean, what does the acronym ITAC actually stand for? If you know.
Sean is still muted if he's talking.
Oh,
We
okay.
can't hear him.
I'm sorry. ITAC is Information and Technical Assistance Center for Councils on Developmental Disabilities.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sorry about
So
that. I've been talking this whole time. I love it.
That's okay. It's all right. I understand. All right. So the motion, as Bambi has presented, is to adopt the goals as discussed and direct staff to create language to align with the ITAC informational evaluation of goals for the committee's consideration at our next meeting. Do I have a second to Bambi's motion?
Lillian has her hand raised.
Yes, Lillian, you have the floor.
Just wanted to second.
Okay, thank you. So Bambi has made the motion. Lillian has seconded. Do I have any abstentions to this motion? Do I have any objections to this motion? Hearing none, this motion has carried. I want to thank you all on the committee for your work today. I want to thank you for your service during this whole process. I know it's a lot of work, and I appreciate the work and input all of you have given today and yesterday as we began this process. I want to thank the public for your participation. You were invaluable to us in helping us to start our process. And so thank you all for your participation and help today as well.
Miss Bambi Palazzolo has her hand raised.
Yes, Bambi, you have the floor.
Hey, I know it's the end of the meeting. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate what you were saying, Randall. I've been on the council many years over the past decade, and this is a lot of work. And I hope that the public is able to see throughout that, we're doing the best that we can to include everything that we know based on our knowledge. I know that inevitably we have left out needs in the developmental disability community, but we'll continue to work through the process and trying to hear people and do the best that we can for the council. And so thanks to everyone for participating, allowing me to participate. And the last thing I want to say is I don't know if everyone's like me, but I think I'm going to hear Courtney's voice over the weekend, like coming like it's an angel from the sky talking to me. So I appreciate Courtney's leadership and throughout the meeting, and I know and preparing for it, as well as the rest of the staff. Thank y'all.
Yes, thank you to Courtney. Thank you, Sean. Thank you to the staff for all your assistance today and yesterday. And again, I want to thank everyone for your participation, and to echo what Bambi said, this is a long process, and certainly whatever we unintentionally left out or forgot today, we're open to hearing all suggestions and all perspectives at all times. Thank you all for your participation.
Thanks, Randall.
Thank you.
Happy 4th.
Thank you. Y'all have a happy
You
4th.
too.